Good afternoon. I'm Patrick Morrison. I'm Assistant to the General President for Health, Safety, and Medicine. And on behalf of General President Harold Schaeberger and our General Secretary Treasurer Thomas Miller, I want to welcome all of you here that are at the workshop, and especially those that are watching a live webcast as the IAFF Safety Stand Down. We really do appreciate that you've dialed in and you're willing to watch this, I think, and pretty incredible presentation on surviving the fire ground and the importance of that. Today's structure fires are very different from those faced by prior generation of firefighters. In many ways, fires have become more hazardous. As a result to the modern fire environment, traditional firefighting methods may no longer always be the safest and most effective. Today you will hear from two members of the UL Advisory Board who have effected change in their local departments, discussing the changing fire environment and the considerations we must take into account when making our tactical decisions. Pete Van Dorp and Sean DeCrane have been deeply involved in the research being conducted by UL and NIST, National Institute of Science and Technology. Their many years of experience have ensured the research projects are grounded in the reality our members face every day. Please welcome Sean DeCrane, who will kick off this afternoon presentation on surviving the fire ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. My name is Sean DeCrane. I have the unique privilege of addressing this group just earlier this morning about building codes. So now we're going to talk about the modern fire environment. I'm a 25-year veteran of the Cleveland Fire Department, risen through the ranks to battalion chief, served as the chief of training for a few years. Now I'm covering the 3rd Battalion. I also represent the International in the building and fire codes through the International Code Council. And I'm also very honored to be a member of the Underwriter Laboratories Firefighter Safety Research Institute. It's something that we get to do. Very often we get to burn buildings, meet a couple times a year, discuss them, and it's all in the name of science. So we get to enjoy ourselves with that. And also, I wanted to introduce my colleague here, Pete Van Dorp.
Good afternoon. My name is Pete Van Dorp. I'm the fire chief in the Algonquin Lake and Hills Fire Protection District. You need 2 patches to get all that on there. And I did my first 33 years with the Chicago Fire Department. I retired there a couple years ago and went out to the suburbs, started a second career. I was the director of training when I retired there, much like Sean's background. And to the point, really, today, is I serve with him on the Underwriters Laboratories Fire Safety Research Institute Advisory Board. So we've been engaged in this stuff since they started. There's a lot to learn, there's a lot to share, and we're gonna try to cram about 10 years worth of research into the next 2 hours. We'll see how good a job we do. We'll give it a shot.
We're going to do our best. The title of today, we came back and started talking about the new firefight, or the intelligently aggressive interior attack. And we can start talking a little bit about semantics and wording and using words, because a lot of people in the fire service like to use the term aggressive. What does that mean? Does that mean what that middle linebacker, that aggressive middle linebacker, where we want you to stick your head down and fill that gap and stop that running back right there at the line? Or do we want to be aggressive? That's the terminology we're trying to do. Is that the message that we're sending to our young firefighters, that we want you to put your head down and run right in through that front door? Well, what we're going to try to do today is talk about the research, because we want our firefighters to be thinking firefighters. We want you to get off that apparatus with your head up, start to size up, start to understand what your fire environment is doing, what your work environment is doing, and how it's going to react to your decisions on the fire ground. We also stole this presentation from our friend Steve Kerber. So Steve, through the research of the last 10 years that we've been involved with, it's produced a ton of information. And we don't want to sit here and give you graphs and videos of all the testing and what the testing showed and the degrees and the pressures. We want to give you something that you can use when you go back to your home firefighter or fire department, which you can use on your fire ground. Because the drive behind this, the goal behind this, is to give our firefighters knowledge, to make them educated firefighters so they can make educated decisions on the fire ground. So we're going to cover 20 tactical recommendations or 20 considerations as you reach the fire ground. So real quickly, what is FSRI, the Firefighter Safety Research Institute? A lot of people believe this research is being done in a vacuum. that it's a bunch of nerdy scientists that sit in an isolated room and create this research. Well, if anybody has met Steve, there's a little bit of a resemblance. We are not Beaker. The Firefighter Safety Research Institute is firefighters. Our board is 21 members of the fire service from across the country. We have New York, Chicago, Atlanta, Cobb County, Algonquin on the Lake Fire Department, Cleveland, Phoenix, LA County, and we also have international representation from Germany, Sweden, and Japan. And we look at this research and we try to identify and extract the information that our members are going to use out in the street. Now, we just wanted to give you a quick video of an introduction to what FSRI is.
The modern fire today, UL is looking at the fire service and saying, how can you do your job better, safer, faster, more efficient for it? The burns and the technology that's coming out here and the information is being used at the NFPA. That's going to write the codes for the future. They're looking at the way that building codes are developed, the way building codes are put together. So everybody, for us, we're kind of selfish at the fire service that we're looking at this saying, how can we be better at the fire side of this? But you can see the group of folks that are here. It's a diverse group that's looking at public safety. And if you think about that, this is about Mrs. Smith and her family. And if there's a fire in their home, what things can we do to make it survivable for them? How do we prevent a fire? How do we make a fire grow slower so that they have more time to respond to it?
Fires have changed dramatically, and unfortunately, the fire service is steeped in tradition and tactics that were born out of the 70s that have served us extremely well as far as ventilation, the effects of ventilation, how we ventilate, when we ventilate. They are still being carried out on the fire ground today. Unfortunately, the environment has changed around us, and at times our tactics don't assist us in the ways we think they're going to.
The challenge is it's still working, right? If the environment changes, if the rules of the game change, if the built environment has changed so much and we continue to do things the way we always did it, then we'll get ourselves in trouble. The name of the game is to figure out when that old stuff still applies and when it doesn't, and you need data to be able to make that decision.
Well, the fire service is notorious for traditions, and a lot of our information is passed down through textbooks and just through generational person-to-person transfer. One of the things that we're doing with these tests are proving or disproving that some of those tactics were correct. Like for years we've taught that a 4x4 ventilation hole is the perfect size. Well, now we're trying to put the science to that to determine maybe it is. Maybe the information was correct all along, or maybe it's only applicable in certain situations and we need bigger holes for newer fire loads or what have you. So it's proving that some of the things we're doing is correct, and it's also giving us new information to expand our tactics.
You all is providing us with the information we need to do our job in a modern fire environment. I couldn't tell the lessons, I couldn't convey the lessons I'm conveying today in the classroom without this information. My experience didn't teach me what I'm learning here today. This is the only place I can learn this. I can't go to enough fires to learn this. I just can't. And so if I don't come here, if we don't have access to this kind of information, and we don't have it packaged the way it's packaged, then we can't learn our job.
My ability to make command decisions on the fire ground has been increased tremendously by the exposure I've had through this testing. My decisions are more concise, more directed, crisper. I can react and implement strategy based on the knowledge that I've received in this controlled environment where I'm not going to endanger members' lives. I'm learning here in this controlled environment things that might take me years on the fire ground to learn and understand.
But research is only, it's great knowledge, but the fire service benefits when we can get that knowledge out to the fire service. And I think an important role that UL has done is creating the educational pieces on the UL website so our fire companies can go and watch it at their own pace, start to learn what their work environment is and how it's going to perform. And then also they've done an important role of getting their members out to the fire service and at different functions to deliver that message and deliver the data that they're collecting. Because we're seeing that our tactics are going to have to change, that we're going to have to make informed decisions, and that information has to come from data that's research driven. And I think that's going to make our members, give them the ability to make good decisions on the fire ground. You can see there I hesitated. I wanted to say make better decisions, but that would be insinuating that we're making poor decisions. And that's not what we're trying to insinuate. We're trying to create informed firefighters, informed fire officers. No one from FSRI is going to come and tell you this is the way you have to operate. What we're trying to do is create this educational material so that you can absorb that material as you understand what your capabilities are and what your resources are on the fire ground. And this is our mission statement. It's dedicated to increasing firefighter knowledge to reduce injuries and deaths in the fire service. I know a number of organizations that are out there that include reduction of firefighter injuries and deaths in their mission statement, but there aren't any organizations out there that are trying to drive that reduction in injuries and deaths through knowledge, through education, so you can make your decisions on the fire ground pertinent to what you're capable of doing. I handed out these booklets. There are more here in the front, there are more here in the back. Take as many as you want. If you want to take some back to your department and hand them out, that's less that I have to carry home. So again, it's about passing this knowledge on.
I mentioned briefly when we started a little bit of my background, where I came from and what I did. I spent 33 years with the Chicago Fire Department. In that time, we buried 46 guys. Yeah, right. Just doesn't make sense, does it? In my last 3 years, I was the director of training. I buried 5. And in a very real sense, I buried them, because in Chicago, the ceremonial stuff mostly gets organized through the training division. So August 1st, 2010, I get appointed director of training. August 9th, Chris Wheatley falls to his death off a fire escape ladder. Here's the manual chief, get to work. Welcome to the training division, right? Curious thing though, in all those years and all those deaths, so Chicago's a big job, right? Almost 5,000 guys. Never lost a friend until the last guy I had to put in the ground. And you should meet Herbie Johnson. Herbie was a fireman's fireman. That's his, it sucks to be you look. You know, get in there, kid. Pick up the mop, pick up the hose, let's go. He was a fireman's fireman, an officer's officer. He was talented, he was engaged. Herbie was one of the few people on the planet that could look you in the eye and say, I've been to a couple hundred just like that one, and be telling you the God's honest truth. Every big city firefighter wants you to think we go to 4 and 5 fires every single day, right? Well, Herbie just about did that. And a man with that kind of knowledge, right? He died on the 2nd floor of a 2.5-story balloon frame building. And if there's a routine fire in the city of Chicago, it's a 2.5-story balloon frame fire. The fire killed Herbie Johnson. He didn't die of a heart attack. He didn't die in a traffic accident. Fire killed Herbie Johnson, okay? Before I go too far, that's the other part of Herbie you have to know. So he always greeted you with the look on the right, but if you crossed him, you got the look on the left, right? You know, if it can happen to Herbie, it can happen to any last one of us. That's the lesson, and that's the point why I bring it up. And I also bring it up because we have to honor these guys, right? And putting their name on a wall, putting a badge up there, that doesn't really make it, does it? Right? How do we honor these guys, right? We learn what they, if Herbie could get up and tell his story, what would he tell us? And that's what we got to try to do. Nobody on that fire ground screwed up. Nobody on that fire ground made a mistake. They were doing what they were trained to do. They were executing what they were trained to execute. But I can tell you this, ventilation got ahead of suppression, right? That delicate balance didn't happen. And when it didn't happen this time, it wasn't a close call. It was a line of duty death, all right? If it can happen in the busiest cities with the busiest companies with the best trained and the most experienced officers running the fire ground, it can happen anywhere. We can't know enough. We just can't know enough. And that's really what we're here for today. It's not just Herbie Johnson. okay? Back in my dad's day, there we go. My dad did 40 years with the CFD, and in his day, no turnout gear to speak of, right? No bunker gear, no SCBA, 1.8 deaths on the fire ground per 100,000 fires. In our era, when we've got all this extra equipment, all this extra training, we're 50% higher. Clearly, we're not doing it right in some way, shape, or form. And what we're going to talk about today isn't the answer, but I guarantee you it's a piece of the answer, and we need to be paying attention to it. All right. Some of the assumptions that we want you to ask questions about and to challenge yourself personally, right? Does venting equal cooling? I mean, really, you got a wood stove at home? Anybody got a wood stove? When you open up the vents, what happens to the fire? It gets bigger, right? Why should we expect the fire ground to be any different? But yet we teach guys, vent to cool. I'm not so sure. Exterior attack is a defensive strategy only. Defensive or offensive are strategies, not locations. We got to get past that because you open up the line from the outside, you're defensive somehow. That's a location, not a strategy. Basement attack should be from the top down, not if you got an alternative. If I were to tell you to cut a hole in that roof and crawl through that hole to fight the attic fire, you'd look at me like I had two heads. But when you're going down that interior basement stair, you're pretty much doing the same thing. So let's at least ask ourselves, do we have some options? You're going to push fire with exterior fire attack, and you do bad stuff with a hose stream from outside the building, yeah. But it's not your stream that's pushing fire. What pushes fire? Air does, right? Fire actually pushes fire, right? If I put the fire out. And there's a right way and a wrong way, and we'll look at that, okay? What about the victims, all right? The faster we cool that environment, the better it is for the victims. And intuitively, that's right. And there's questions about steam and thermal balance and all that. And that's what the research is helping us understand much better. It's not just our anecdotal information from the fire ground anymore. It's research-driven information that we can marry with that and make better decisions. And then vent and rescue and search before suppression. You know what? In a modern fire ground, I don't know that you can move fast enough. You know, and we ought to think about that. If you can only do one thing, you ought to give serious consideration to putting the fire out. Everything's going to get better when you do that. And that's not really a new idea, but I think some of us have lost touch with that. For a lot of reasons, right, our experience isn't what it used to be. You know, my dad's generation of guys really did go to 3 or 4 fires a day. Very few, if any of us, are doing that. And if we're relying on our experience to teach us our jobs, we're just going to fall behind. We just are. And I think we have in a lot of respects, okay? We don't spend enough time on fire behavior and things like that. Sometimes when we say that's the way we've always done it, we don't question why. A lot of times that's the way we've always done it for a good reason, because it works. No reason to stop doing it. But is it still working, or am I just doing it because that's my habit? Ask why. That's what we want. Ask why, okay? So we'll look at all of these things and a few others as well. We're going to run out of time. This is 10 years worth of research we're going to try to do in 2 hours. So we start with Kerber's top 20 sort of short version of this. And then just in case we can't get through 20, here's my top 6 or 8, okay? And this is just me. And I won't explain a lot of it, but we can come back to it. Hopefully it'll trigger some discussion, right? All buildings are lightweight constructed buildings until you can prove otherwise, even when you know they're not. I'd even say it this way. Think of it. Treat every building, every fire building, like a balloon frame building, and you'll probably make better decisions on the fire ground, right? If you got fire rocking out of an attic in a 2.5-story balloon frame, what's the first place you look? I can go anywhere in the country and people tell me that question, answer that question just like that. And why? Because of all the interconnected void spaces, right? You don't want fire wrapped around you that you don't know about. If we just did that basic check on every building we went into, what's going on below me, what's going on above me before we committed, we'd probably be making better decisions on the fire ground. All fires are ventilation limited fires until you can prove otherwise. There's just not enough air for all of this fuel. And no matter how many windows are open and how much fire is blowing out of those windows, somewhere in that building is fuel that needs more air. And if you give it more air, it's going to take off. And we have to have a clearer understanding of all that. Ventilation does not equal cooling. All right? Ventilation will always make the fire hotter. It's not necessarily a bad thing, and it doesn't mean you don't ventilate. But we have to clearly understand that, right? Because if I ventilate, I need to be able to immediately do one of 2 things: cool or isolate. And if I can't do that, and I'm ventilating, and I think the ventilation is going to isolate it, I got news for you. In a modern fuel environment, more often than not, that's just not going to happen. All right? Water doesn't push fire. Air does, fire does, but it's not water. And it's really simple. If you maximize your water and minimize your air entrainment, good things happen. If you do the opposite, meaning if you use a fog stream from the exterior of the building, bad things are going to happen. And we'll look at that in some detail. Suppression should always be your tactical priority, not your strategic priority. That's life safety rescue, however you want to define it, but your tactical priority. I will promise you that you can always suppress faster than you can search and rescue. And when your back is against the wall and you can't do both simultaneously, I want you to at least seriously consider this. Because when you do this successfully, conditions get better for everybody everywhere, whether you can locate them or not. But if you're in rescue mode, you can only help those people that you can get to and locate. So at least give this some thought. We have to learn to control doors, even the ones behind us. Doors are very, very efficient ventilation openings. And it's not just because they let stuff out, it's because they let stuff in. That low opening lets fresh air in to feed that fire. We often underestimate the impact of an open door, and we need to learn to control doors. We teach guys when they're vent entering and searching to get inside and close the door right away, right? Search their way back to the window. But if we send a guy to the second floor via the stairs and he enters that bedroom, we don't teach him to close the door behind him. Why not? Right? Close the door, get to the window, open the window. Life is good. We got them crawling around the room while conditions continue to get worse. Let's think about that. Why are we doing these sorts of things? We got to learn to control doors. Door control, not closing doors, door control. Being in control of the opening has to be part of our fundamental fireground operation. Removing the hazard from the victim is always going to be faster than removing the victim from the hazard. This takes us back to the couple that were preceding this. And I want you to at least think about that, okay? Remove the hazard from the victim is much more effective than removing the victim from the hazard, 99.9% of the time. And just look at your SOGs and think about that a little bit. And then finally, make sure you master the box. And the box is simply your SOGs, your knowledge base, and all that kind of stuff. Too often, we are training our firefighters and our fire officers to think outside the box. Who wants to arrive on a fire ground with 4 companies with 4 different officers all thinking outside the box? Anybody? But if that's what you train them to do all the time, and that's how we're always correcting them, then that's what they're going to do. Right? The box is there for a reason. The box is those SOGs. When that's not working or whatever, that's fine. Think outside the box. But we have to make sure we're masters of that box before we go trying to think outside it. And sometimes I think we lose that. All right? This is directly from Steve Kerber. Okay? I've been working with these guys since they started, and I never heard them say anything remotely like any of this. Nobody's saying don't ventilate. Nobody's saying you don't go inside. Nobody says you always start your water from the outside of the building. Nobody's saying you can't go over a basement fire. Nobody's saying you don't vertically ventilate. Nobody's saying anything anywhere close to that. We're asking you to ask why. That's all. Why am I doing what I'm doing? If it still works, if I can justify it in light of all this knowledge I'm gaining, have at it. All right? But at least stop and ask why. It's really simple.
So this is the basic model that we've used over the years. We've created an SOP or an SOG, we trained on it, and then we apply it into an incident. And many times we go back, we start to critique at the kitchen table. What did we do right? More importantly, what did we do wrong? What can we learn from this? And then we come back and maybe revise it based on our experience. What we're trying to do is add in this research component. So we can look at what our tactics are, we can gain our knowledge from what we're applying on the fire ground, our positives and our negatives, and then when we have questions, we can go back to the research. Why did this happen? Did fire get blown on me, or did I start to burn up because someone stuck an exterior hand line through the window? Or was it because someone opened a door distal to where I'm operating, and I created a flow path, I created an inlet and an outlet, and that's where I happen to be operating? We've had a number of firefighters and a number of fire officers with 30 plus years on the job going through this going, that's what it was. That's what happened to me. Because we're taking the research and now applying it and looking at our SOPs and our SOGs, and we're changing them. We're changing them. We've changed ours in Cleveland because we had a lot of shalls. You shall do this, you shall do that. Every single fire, you shall do this, you shall do that. And we were finding in a lot of fires, we didn't want you to do this, or we didn't want you to do that. We train our officers, and then we handcuff them with decision-making on the fire ground. So we have to give our officers the knowledge and then empower them to make decisions on the fire ground that are applicable to that point in time. Is it always through the front door? Maybe it's through the B side, maybe it's through the C side, or the D side that I need to make entry. A major metropolitan fire department, up until 2007, had it in their SOPs that every residential fire, you shall go through the front door. But we're changing those thought processes. And is it important? Well, Pete gave you some national statistics, but let me bring it down closer to home. We have a couple of members from FDNY on the advisory board, George Healy and John Cirillo. And George and John are very involved in FDNY and educating in the research aspects of FDNY. So John did a little research, and we were discussing the modern fire environment versus the legacy fire environment, shall we say. So John looked into the line of duty deaths in New York. And from 1958 to 1983, in these 25 years, he identified 202 line of duty deaths. That's a staggering number of line of duty deaths, but 202. And the question was, how many of these firefighters died in the flow path? Quite honestly, how many of these firefighters burned to death? So John looked at every single episode, every single incident, and actually identified, just as an example, in 1972, they went to 47,000 working structure fires. That is like 2 or 3 or 4 a day, isn't it, Pete? So how many of these 202 line of duty deaths resulted or were from being caught in the flow path? And John was able to identify 4. Okay, so these are the war years, right? They write books about these years within FDNY. So let's look at a subsequent period of time. As an example, in 2003, they went to just over 26,000 working structure fires. So a reduction of 20,000 structure fires in that period. So we took 1985 to 2010, and John identified 52 line of duty deaths, obviously not including 343 brothers we lost on 9/11. That was a single event. He wanted to look at the line of duty deaths that were happening over this 25-year period. Now, how many of these firefighters died in the flow path? Out of 202, he was able to identify 4. Out of 52, 14. So this caused a lot of discussion within our group, certainly caused a lot of discussion in FDNY. What are the causes of this? Inexperience. We have 20,000 less structure fires. So our members are our officers getting the experience on the fire ground in order that they can learn from that exposure and see the changing dynamics in the fire behavior. The lack of training. NFPA 1403 doesn't allow us to use the number one commodity we face in every fire we go to, polyurethane foam. We use clean wood products in our training. I'm not saying we changed 1403 to go back to using volatile material, because they're there for a reason. Those restrictions are there because we were losing members in training fires. The new generation. Sorry, you guys just don't get it. You don't get it. Well, 25 years ago, I didn't get it either. And I have a friend at home who searches the internet. I don't think he does anything else except search the internet. And he sends out articles. He goes, hey, and this guy gets it. This guy gets it. And he sent an article, and I read it. And it was a lieutenant that was complaining that the new generation just doesn't get it. Because the day before, he had a working structure fire, and the next morning when he sat at the coffee table or at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, none of the young guys ran to him to talk about that fire. So therefore, this generation just doesn't get it. Well, the first problem is he had coffee. I mean, the new generation, it's got to be a latte or a mocha or a frappe or something like that if you're going to get them to the kitchen table. But did you walk around and see where these young kids were? How many were posting something on their blog or on their social media site? How many were researching what happened at that fire so they could learn from it? If we want the young generation to communicate with us, then we've got to bring them there. We've got to reach out to them. They just communicate a little bit differently, just like we did. The SCBA is allowing us to go places where we shouldn't be or where traditionally firefighters couldn't go. That's absolutely true. But sorry, we're not getting rid of our SCBAs. There's an expectation from the public that we're going to initiate an interior attack, save their family members, and save their property. And also with the cancer exposures, it just doesn't make sense. The bunker gear is allowing us to get places where we shouldn't be. We're not recognizing the rapidly changing environment and time to affect self-rescue. And this is an interesting question, and one that you have to understand where FDNY got their bunker gear from. And real quick story, it was in the 1990s, and George Healy was at this fire. John Drennan, a rock, a legend in FDNY. Simple fire, it was a 4-suite apartment, ground floor, occupants had left, they finished the floor, they put they put the garbage in a plastic bag and put it on top of a stove and went to go get something to eat. Well, in the meantime, the fire ignites. The bag ignites, starts to build up. Well, it becomes ventilation limited. But they had a non-working fireplace. And so the smoke was going up the fireplace. A passerby sees it, calls it in. This is a routine job. FDNY shows up. Engine company starts stretching a hand line. Captain Drennan sends his Ironman to the roof. He takes the interior steps. They start going up the steps. Ironman takes the skylight. They kick in the apartment door. We go from ventilation limited to instant flashover. With an open skylight, what did we create? A flow path, with firefighters operating in that flow path. The one firefighter was under debris. George said they were standing on him. They didn't recognize they were standing on the debris, the remains of a firefighter, until they saw the reflective tape. Another firefighter they pulled out of the building, he looked up, he said, regardless of what happens to me tonight, this is the greatest job in the world, and he passed away that night. Captain John Drennan survived for 40 days with 3rd and 4th degree burns, over 60% of his body. His legs burned to the bone. And Rudy Giuliani came in, saw this, saw Vina Drennan there, turned to his assistant and said, get these men their turnout gear. And that's how FDNY got their turnout gear. But so let's go back to it. Is the bunker gear the problem? And John looked at the 14 fatalities, and what he found? 7 were the pre-issuance of bunker gear, and 7 were the post-issuance of bunker gear. And to what Pete was saying, does this prove or disprove the issue of bunker gear? No, what it says, if we want to reduce injuries and fatalities, that it's a multi-pronged approach. We have to be involved in codes, we have to be involved in standards, we have to train our members, we have to educate our members, we have to train on that knowledge. We have to use our PPE, and we have to understand the limitations of our PPE and use it correctly. That's how we're going to reduce our injuries and our fatalities.
So, we're almost there, right? We got started. We're not even an hour into this. This is like a record for us. No amount of technology is going to replace your need to know your profession. And this is coming from the propeller head himself, from Kerber, who's all about the technology, right? But he's going to tell you flat out, if you don't understand building construction, if you don't understand fire dynamics, you don't understand your job. I'm like you. I want to get dirty and break stuff. I want to pick up some tools, and I want to get out there and make a mess. That's why we're here. We get to do all the stuff our mom didn't let us do when we were growing up, right? But if we pass this up, if we pass the knowledge part up, then we're not doing our job. We don't really understand our job adequately, okay? You can have a lot of nice gizmos, but they're not going to replace your knowledge. Don't rely on it. To that end, knowing how your bunker gear works is critical. In the interest of time, I won't open the question up, right, because it eats up some time. But I often ask when we get to this part, I'll ask somebody in the room, particularly the younger guy right out of school, I'll say, how does your gear work? And ultimately the answer comes out, he thinks the gear reflects heat in some way. But it doesn't do that. Your gear is a heat storage device. It's an energy storage device. Your gear works by absorbing and storing energy, slowing down its path to you. The lesson here is it can only store so much. When you get uncomfortably warm and you're staying uncomfortably warm, that should be a danger sign. Right? Yeah, it wasn't too hot, we were okay, it hurt a little bit on the straps. You're right on the edge, brother. You are right on the edge, okay? And we got to get a better understanding, and the science helps us do that. Let's take an example here. This testing was done by NIST as a result of a line of duty death in a training exercise. And watch the training officer that repeatedly goes into the burn room to add fuel to the fire. And every time he comes out, he's a little brighter, right? His gear is a little hotter. His gear absorbs that heat. And you see when he sits down and takes a pause, it's not cooling off again, is it? Because he's still in a very warm environment. His gear has already stored a whole lot of energy. What's going to happen when these two guys are standing next to one another and one guy's absorbed a whole lot more energy for whatever reason, and there's an event, there's a flashover, there's a rollover. What's going to happen? One guy's going to survive and one guy won't. And we'll all be scratching our heads. Where were you? I was right next to him. Then how come you're not burned like he is? If we understand these things a little better, we can make better decisions on the fire ground. How many times have you been up next to a door, right, and you're waiting for your water? And you're waiting for your water, right? And you're waiting for your water. How about we just do this, right? Why stand there and get our gear all warmed up before we make entry? All right? It has a very real consequence, and we should recognize those very real consequences. Here's another one that NIST did for us, and I think this has gotten around pretty well now. What's the weak link in our gear? Face pieces, right? All right, we often toss numbers around. We like to toss numbers around, and it's good, but it's not complete knowledge. When does that face piece fail? At what temperature? It's more 400 or 500 is the one that's getting tossed around, and they're trying to raise it up, so maybe the new standard is more like 8 or 9. But Dan Madrikowski will make the point to you, that's when it fails. It begins to fail a couple hundred degrees before that, all right? In this experiment, you can see the crazing of the facepiece as it's being exposed to some radiant heat. And this is on a mannequin that's breathing in and out. And it's hard to see a little bit, but you'll start to see it right here, is a hole actually develops in the facepiece, okay, as he's breathing in there. And you may not know this, but even with the new standard, your facepiece can develop a hole and still pass the test, as long as your air supply lasts a defined period of time. What happens when your facepiece gets fogged up or you lose visibility on your facepiece? What's your instinctive move? And what happens when you do this under these conditions? Okay, so a better understanding of how our gear works and what its limitations are critically important, and that's a big piece of what the research is trying to do for us. Give us this very practical, hands-on kind of knowledge that we could put to use.
One thing to that point, Gavin Horn at the Illinois Fire Service Institute is actually researching right now the repetitive exposures, the impact of repetitive exposures to heat on our face pieces. And what we're learning is that each time you're being exposed to elevated temperatures, that face piece is starting to become a little bit more compromised. Testing isn't done. We don't have all the research back yet, but that's another important concept or another important piece of information that we need in order to operate safer on the fire ground. And as we were talking, I think it was in the codes session, we hear that fires are burning hotter and faster these days. And as Pete was discussing, our turnout gear absorbs that energy. What we're facing nowadays is more energy on that fire ground. We are exposing ourselves to increased radiant heat, which then is absorbed quicker into our turnout gear. That's why it seems like it's so much hotter. That's why it seems like it's so much faster. Now, once that room flashes over, is there a temperature difference? Yeah, but 1,800 to 2,000 degrees isn't that big of a deal. But this is what we're being exposed to early on in the event. And we have to understand the limitations of our tools. Pete talked about it. We have tools, we have great gadgets, but we have to apply them correctly. And if you start to look at the thermal imaging, and this is important because after the death of Brother Arnie Wolf in Green Bay, August 13th of 2006, the International Association of Fire Chiefs issued a directive that directed their members or encouraged their members to use the thermal imager in size-ups of basement fires. And was well intended, but again, there was no research applied to it. But once we applied the research, this is what we started to understand, that the thermal imager can't see through objects, that there's a temperature difference. And this is actually the first research effort that UL did on behalf of the fire service. And this is when we were trying to get the requirement to protect lightweight floors after the collapse that killed Arnie Wolf. And because of this research, we're successful. In the 2012 edition of the International Residential Code, lightweight floors are now required to be protected with a half-inch piece of gypsum board or an equivalent. So we do see results from this research, and not just on the fire ground. But as you can see here, this is an ASTM E119 test. If you notice up here, what has happened with this fire? This is gas-driven. What has happened in this fire? If you say, I know the lights are tough. It has transitioned to a structure fire, because the structural elements of this floor have become involved in fire. It's become part of the fuel load. In fact, shortly, it'll be the fuel load in this scenario. You have two firefighters up here, and you have a simulated distribution of weight, similar to what you'll find in a typical residential property of furniture. The firefighters fully geared up are 300 pounds each. I don't know where they get that number from. I think it should be more like 225. But this thermal imaging camera is centered on the floor right here next to that firefighter. So if you look up the thermal imaging camera, our temperatures in this basement here are around 1,300 degrees, 12 to 1,300 degrees. Though this is a simple I-joist, 12-inch I-joist with the webbing. Is that webbing important? Absolutely. That's what carries the load. That's what distributes the load of that floor system. Is this fire starting to eat away at that webbing? Absolutely it is. Starting to further compromise this floor system. But if you look at the floor, we have no deflection. Again, these firefighters are stationary. They're not moving objects. They're not putting 400 pounds per square inch with every step. They're stationary objects. So you'll have a different application on the fire ground. But if you look at your thermal imaging camera, what does it tell you about conditions in the basement? They're fine. They're fine. Can it tell you that that structural floor is compromised? Not at all. Can it give you an indication that there might be something in the basement? Yeah, when you have some penetrations, you might see some heat coming through, but overall, it's not giving you a clear picture. Is there anything that's giving you an indication that something's happening to that floor system? You see those firefighters bouncing? You're not going to see that in the real world. That's what happens when you have fire. You create pressure. So there's a fluctuation of pressure in that chamber, in that furnace chamber, because it's allowing air in so the fire can sustain itself. It has to relieve the air. So there's a fluctuation in the pressures, and that's where you're getting that bouncing from. But shortly here, you'll see it start to go away. If you look over on the left, the bottom left, what's happening with those floor systems, or what's happening to those I-joists? Yeah, they're pretty much gone. You do have some deflection in the floor, but again, our old adage that we taught the fire service is that dimensional lumber will start to sag. That'll give you an indication that the floor is compromised and you need to get out. Truss systems or lightweight systems fall or fail with no indications whatsoever. And our research actually showed us you're going to have more deflection in this I-joist prior to collapse than in traditional dimensional lumber, because this is what they're designed to do. The I-joist is designed to give some way, to give deflection. And this is actually one of the benefits of the requirements in the floors, protecting the floors, that the home builders actually have to upgrade the I-joist that they use because they don't want too much deflection in that floor because it'll cause a crack below. So we got 2 bangs for the buck. But we get some deflection here in this floor system right here. The only thing that's holding up this floor is the top flange of those I-joists. And again, these firefighters are stationary. Will it be different if they're walking around or crawling around it? Also, what do we teach our firefighters when they make an entry, especially if they're doing search and rescue? Find a wall, right? Stick to the wall. So are you going to see that deflection? Are you going to sense it? Here, there's enough of a deflection that, yes, you should recognize that something bad is going on, that your working environment, that your operating system, that floor is compromised. The question, if you look at the thermal imaging camera, it only shows 100 degrees. Is it giving a true indication that something's going on or how bad it is? No, it's not. The question is, do you have enough time to effect egress once you recognize that this floor is compromised? And the answer is maybe not. And you can see the wide area of collapse here. And that was another thing that we've taught. Truss system, well, we're trying to get these removal devices on our clothing allowance in Cleveland, just, pull you out. But we haven't gotten there yet. But if you design it, if you're able to make it, just put the term fire into it, and you could charge 10 times more. But one of the other things we saw is, tradition-wise, what we taught is that dimensional floor, when it collapses, will be an isolated collapse. Maybe you'll you'll catch yourself between the rafter or the beams. Every floor system, dimensional, lightweight, it was a wide area collapse when the collapse occurred. And again, this is just showing you, this is the limitation of the thermal imaging. It's reading the surface, the heat transfer from one object to another object until they're of equal temperature.
Let's not let our training props and our training ground set us up for failure. By definition, we can't do live fire training anymore, haven't for years. And I wish, me personally, I want to get rid of the term, because if you take a guy into a building made out of concrete and steel full of hay and pallets and you say, we're doing some live fire training today, he's going to come out with the idea that that's what he did, and it's going to be nothing like the actual fire he's going to face on the fire ground. I really do think that simulated fire training, that it makes a difference that we call it what it is. An airline pilot doesn't get in a flight simulator and think he's flying an airplane. He's flying a flight simulator, and he knows its limitations. And we got to look at our training grounds as the same way, all right? Part of the reason is that we just, the fires are so different, and we have to make sure that we're making that part of the training itself, all right? You experience as close as I can bring you today in this environment. However, it has to be followed up immediately with how is that actual environment different, okay? That takes us back to spending more time on fire behavior and fire dynamics. If you look at the national averages, what's in our curriculum, you can become a certified firefighter in most states with only a total of 3 hours of fire behavior training. That's crazy. Think about it. Think about when you had that training, right at the very beginning, right? Conduction, convection, radiation. Okay, let's go to the fun stuff. we do that to our guys. We do them a disservice when we minimize the importance of all of that. In most states, you can get certified as an officer, even at the second level, and have no additional fire behavior training at all. Ask yourselves, how long was it between you came on the job and you got your first promotion? Has anything changed in that time in terms of the fire ground and how fires grow and develop and what the fuels are? Maybe just a little bit, and yet we don't require any additional training to catch you up on that. We just assume, well, you probably figured that out on your own. That's our bad. We don't want that to keep happening, all right? Can I ventilate my way to goodness in this concrete building? Can I make this hellaciously hot? You've been there. I'm sure many of you have done it, right? Because it's absorbing, it'll store a whole lot of heat. But if I over-ventilate this building, what happens to that fire? It gets a little bit bigger, and it actually probably makes the situation inside better for everybody because there's really very little fuel in that building. I can make it hellacious hot, but it's not a lot of fuel. That residential structure fire has a whole lot of fuel in it, and when I over-ventilate that residential structure fire, I trigger that fuel off, all right? And this is where this can get us in trouble because we can't replicate that on the training ground. We should not be able to replicate that on the training ground. The way Dan Madrzykowski would put this, it resonates with me. He says it's the second fire that's going to kill you. It's not the stuff that's burning. It's when the gases that gave off, the underventilated, right, that rich fuel, it's when that takes off, that's the one that's going to hurt you. We need to pay a little more attention to that. And the research is helping us do that. Okay, here's an example, and this is part of how we look at these fires and why we do this research and what it can help us understand. I like these the best, and there's a lot of them out there, and I especially like these when you marry them up with some actual fire porn off of YouTube, all right? So you can start making the tie to yourself and all your guys. So what we're doing in the laboratory really is mimicking what's happening on the fire ground, because we can use actual fuels here. Not only can we use actual fuels, but we can look, we can observe, and we can measure the entire fire ground simultaneously. You can't do that on the fire ground. You're too busy. You got work to do. You got missions to accomplish. You got things to do. Trying to put together the whole package can be really difficult. And this is what the research helps us do, is we can look at all of this and look at the smoke signature on the outside in the upper left. We can look at what our view might be like as we approach that room on the interior, right? We can take a really good look on how the fire is growing and developing and how this tells us about what this is, okay? This is kind of like your classic underventilated single room. This room could be at the end of a hallway. This could be an outside entrance just like it looks like here. You see, I think you've seen enough of these over the years now. You see how this transition to flash over, how the low fuels get hot, start to off gas, everything triggers, runs around the flash over.
It's talking to you, Tommy.
Yeah, it's talking to you. Everything about your workplace has changed and is going to continue to change, and our tactics have to evolve. I like the way David Rhodes put it in that initial UL piece, where he said, it's given us research to expand our tactics. It's not really about changing. It's not about saying, don't do this anymore. This probably has a lot of credibility still and a lot of use. I want to give you more tools. I want to give you more tactics. I want to give you more options. I want to give you some examples of why that is. Homes aren't just a little bit bigger. They're much bigger. And those homes are full of open, interconnected spaces. And those interconnected spaces have multitudes more fuel in it than they've ever had before. Name me something in your house that's not predominantly plastic. You know, some guys will say the dining room table, and that's covered in what? Polyurethane, right? All right, so we're just immersed in petroleum products. All of us, we're immersed in it. We shouldn't underestimate the power of that. We've got all of these increased void spaces again. We basically, when we went from balloon frame to platform frame, we inadvertently put fire stops in our buildings. When we went to truss construction now, we've reintroduced all of those interconnected voids. So balloon framing is back, in essence, okay? Changing in the building materials, as Francis Brannigan taught us years and years, decades ago, if I replace component A with component B and B is less massive, guess what? It's less fire resistive. It's not about the gusset plates. It's not about the glue. It's about the less mass. We're engineering mass out of our buildings. We always have been. We're just really getting really good at it. Smaller lots lead to more exposure fires. If you're an urban firefighter, this is not news. If you're a suburban firefighter, this could be really big news, right? Don't get caught short-handed when they start building your neighborhoods differently than they used to. And then new technologies. Solar panels are one of the big ones, okay? 600-volt DC power systems on people's roofs. How do you put that fire out? Lithium-ion batteries used to store that power over refrigerator-sized lithium-ion batteries in people's basements. How do you put that fire out? beats the pants off of me too, right? We just don't know, and this is becoming common. It's not rare. It's going to become common. What'd you pick up?
So how many have seen the comparison video that we've done that puts the modern fire environment next to the legacy fire environment? And we reach flash over, we reach flash over in 3 minutes and 35 seconds. That's because why? It's got open air. It's got all the air it can use. So let's take that same exact comparison and put it into a ranch home that many of us face each day. On the left, you have the legacy fuel. So you see the clean burning or not as much smoke. On the right, you have your modern fuel, so you have that heavy smoke. These have flame retardants in it. So what do flame retardants strive to do? Produce or inhibit burning, clean burning. So it's the byproduct of incomplete combustion. Smoke, carbon monoxide. What is smoke? Fuel. So we're past 5 minutes here, and we didn't flash over, and why is that? Because we're in a closed compartment. We limited the amount of oxygen that this fire had available. But do not fear, our responding fire department will soon arrive. And when we arrive, what are we going to do? We're going to ventilate, because we're going to go inside to initiate extinguishment. Depending on the heat, the temperature, depending on the fuel, depending on the location and its distal to the opening, and also your vent point, you're going to see a transition to flashover. It could be less than 60 seconds. Could be as much as 2 minutes. Here we're going to see transition to flashover in about 2 minutes. Again, with the legacy, very similar to those tests, that demonstration test we did in Building 11. You have the fire that's slowly building, and it will transition to flashover, very similar to the times that we had in the demonstration. But again, we're limiting the amount of air. And Pete mentioned it. We have the changing building materials. We've gone from solid board to plywood to OSB. In some neighborhoods, I was talking about it earlier in the codes, in some neighborhoods, depending on your climate area, the only thing the codes require when it comes to residential construction on those walls is for it to resist a wind load. So if you put some cross bracing in that can resist a wind load for your jurisdiction or your geographical area, you can put cardboard on the side of your home. And in some neighborhoods, they were realizing thefts. They had expensive alarm systems. They had deadbolts on the floor, on the doors. And the only thing the thief needed was a utility knife. Just cut the vinyl siding, cut the rigid foam board, punch out the gypsum wall, and step right in. So these changing environments or these changing materials have an impact on that fire growth also. We'll see it here. Plaster and lath versus gypsum board. Gypsum board is very good. Gypsum board performs very well, and it's recognized in the codes for its fire performance. But lath and plaster perform much better at protecting our structural members. In fact, when we did the testing at UL in 2006, we saw a collapse of unprotected 2x10 at 18 minutes and 45 seconds. When we protected that same 2x10 with lath and plaster, it lasted over 79 minutes. Where did we develop our strategies, our current strategies today? In the 70s and the 80s, when the widespread use of SCBAs and full PPE were being introduced into the fire service. In homes that were built in the 20s, 30s, 40s, with lath and plaster, with legacy materials. That environment is changing. We need to change along with it. And again, just some changing materials on the sheathing. I got these slides out of order, so let me explain them backwards. Energy codes are driving more energy efficiency. So to do that, if you're anywhere north of Jacksonville, the most common method is to use rigid foam board. This is polyisocyanate. This is a type of insulation that's commonly used throughout the US. And they put that on the exterior of the home to increase energy savings. But you can see, that's real time. That is not a sped up version of the video. That is real time. Now, the key is, if we're going to put that on for energy performance, what do we want to do? Well, we want to protect it. So we use vinyl siding. And the video didn't kick on. Oh, there it goes. So we put the vinyl siding over it. Now, what's vinyl siding designed to do when it's exposed to heat? It kind of shrivels up and it falls away. And this is a concern to the Vinyl Siding Institute. One, they also sell foam board. So they're trying to sell vinyl siding with the foam attached to the vinyl siding, vinyl clad siding, and one-step product. You can put it right on the exterior of your home. You're going to have good energy performances. And the vinyl siding does not propagate flame until it's exposed to temperatures of 850 degrees or higher. Well, what's the temperature of flame? Yeah, it's over 1,000 degrees, 1,100, 1,200 degrees. So is the vinyl siding going to propagate a little bit of flame? Yeah, it will, but it's designed to shrivel up and fall away, thereby exposing that foam. And we're seeing multiple apartment fires that are protected to 13R sprinkler systems. What's with the 13R? You don't protect the attic space. So we're losing these buildings due to exterior fires. We're losing firefighters. Kyle Wilson died in an exterior fire that went up the side of the house, transitioned into the attic, and came down on top of him while he was searching that master bedroom. We're losing firefighters to these fires. So at UL, let's research it, right? So on the left here, we have the vinyl siding over the OSB. We have vinyl siding over 1-inch rigid foam board. And then we have vinyl siding over 1-inch rigid foam board with spray polyurethane foam in the attic space. And this inset here is the attic space. This is a 200 kilowatt fire. This is simply a garbage can, a waste can fire. Not much. You know, I have a friend, I went to visit him the one day and I walked into his backyard and I looked at the side of his house and all of the vinyl siding was melted. I said, Jim, what happened? He goes, never ever cook bacon on an open grill. So as long as there are humans out there, we're going to have a job. But you're going to you see heavy smoke coming into this attic space here. And this is, again, a simple waste can fire. So it's going to transition very shortly here. At 1 minute and 51 seconds, what do you see? You see an exterior fire that's transitioned to an interior fire. Now, what are we going to do when we arrive? Hey, we're going to be moth to the flame. Every single one of us have done it. Bust open that front door, take that charged hand line, get up to the attic, knock this beast down, right? What are we forgetting? The exterior fire. We're forgetting the source. It's got to come into our tactical considerations. We've got to get water on the source of the fire. Over here, what's happening? Well, it's not transitioning into the attic right away because it has to burn through that spray polyurethane foam. It will. It'll take about 10 minutes or just over 10 minutes till it transitions to the attic. But what we also realized here with this energy was going vertical. And an unprotected soffit, that energy could still go vertical and right into the attic space. Here, it hit an obstruction and it started going horizontal. So we started having radiated heat that was now an impact or putting that exposure at risk. So again, it comes back to what are our tactical objectives here? What are our considerations? We've got to get water on that exterior fire. Pete mentioned the PV and the power generation. Listen, we don't have time to really go into it, but this lithium-ion energy is coming. Within 5 years, every home, every building that has a photovoltaic system will have an energy storage system on site. And we're going to have to deal with it. This lithium-ion technology is electrochemical technology, and it can be awfully imbalanced. And you saw it with the hoverboards recently. They're losing a whole industry because they use cheaper batteries. And there are 10,000 battery manufacturers in China that want to sell their products here in the US. And the challenge that we have is we're playing catch up to make sure that it's reliable technology, that it's safe technology. And in New York, they want to put them in buildings, full floors of energy storage systems. We're going to get more into that as we go, but UL did some research on the photovoltaic systems and how to fight a fire safely. A lot of these systems, you can't even tell that those are photovoltaic panels up on the roof. So we're working, we have Matt Pace from San Jose, that's on the NFPA 70 committee for us, representing the IAFF, representing you. And we're working to get these things labeled, and we're also working to get modular shutdown instead of just the array shutdown. We want this to shut down at the modular level so you can operate more safely.
Sure.
Since you invented wind.
Yeah, I invented wind tonight. All right. One of the early studies that NIST did, along with UL, was studying wind-driven fires. It had its genesis back in like 2006, somewhere around there, looking at can we replicate stairwell pressurization systems with portable equipment. Yeah, it looked like we could do that. Could we do it under live fire conditions? I don't know. Let's try that. We managed to acquire a high-rise that was coming down in Chicago where we could do the same set of experiments under live fire conditions. Turns out you can do it pretty effectively. You can pressurize those stairwells, keep the smoke out of them as you're advancing up into your fire. We had guys from New York with us there, and they said, look, we got all this stuff here. We got all the equipment. We've got the researchers. Can we look at some wind-driven fires? Can we look at what happens when that window fails in this high-rise and 20 miles an hour worth of wind hits that fire? Because they had some line-of-duty deaths. Chicago's had some close calls where guys, I mean, really just 10 cents worth of fire, that window fails, and now it's asses and elbows, everybody trying to get out. We had 4 guys in Chicago bail out a 4th-floor window without thinking twice. And all it was a couch, all right? New York lost 3 guys in a hallway 140 feet downstream from where that fire was. It came that fast and that hot. How many of us, I think we all know that weather is part of our size-up, right? It's all something you all studied. You mentioned it during your promotional exam, whatever it is. Who can tell me the wind direction and speed at the last working fire they went to? Probably not so much, right? So are we really giving it consideration, or are we just talking about it? Because really, if you have an open field or that fire is above the surrounding windbreak, or certainly if you're in a high-rise, wind makes all the difference in the world. I would completely change my approach to that fire depending on wind speed and direction under those conditions. But it has to be a conscious thought. It can't be something we just pay lip service to. A couple of examples here. This is the fire that we did in Chicago. This is on the 3rd floor of a high-rise. You have Pete doing the blank out thing again. Okay. So you've got upper left, you've got the room on fire. It's just a small, probably a 10 by 10 bedroom. Down low on the left, you have the thermal imaging view from the hallway. On the right, this is the video view in the hallway. This is from the hallway looking into the apartment door. When you go into this door, this is what you would see, kind of an odd layout. The kitchen's right in front of you. The living area is off to the left, and then behind those cabinets is the hallway that takes us down to this bedroom. So as you see, fire growth and development is pretty normal. I got a bidirectional flow path. I got an open stairwell door. I got an open bulkhead door. I got an open apartment door. So this is going to get enough air to keep burning. Hot gases coming out the top, cool replacement air coming in to feed the fire low. Nice stratification inside the apartment there. No turbulence, no flame, no rollover. Nothing to tell me that this is about to go crazy on me, right? Pretty simple room and contents fire. What I would tell you, we'll cut to the chase. Get up and close this door as fast as you can. That's the first move, right? Because what happens when that room flashes over and that window fails, 20 miles an hour is 1,001, 1,002, 1,003, and everything is untenable from ignition source to your means of egress. That's floor to ceiling 40-mile-an-hour winds at about 18 to 2,000 degrees, 1,800 to 2,000 degrees, at about 40 miles an hour, okay? That temperature reading is the cinder block, not the air temperature. That's the thermal imager reading the cinder block. Within a minute of flashover, that's going to peg out at 1,000 degrees. Imagine how much energy it takes to raise the temperature of a surface like that to 1,000 degrees in a minute. It's not about the temperature, it's about the energy, all right? All the 2.5-inch hose lines in the world aren't going to help you here because you can't get your water to the seat of the fire. All right? Wind speed, wind direction, weather is much more important than we ever thought. Has there always been wind? Has there always been fire? Absolutely. What's changed? The nature of the fuel and the amount we put in our buildings. That's what's changed. When I blow wind over a bunch of pallets or its furniture equivalent, it's not all that tough. When I blow wind over a bunch of petroleum, okay, it is. And from the outside, you can see this very unnatural fire behavior coming out the window. That's the wind is hitting that window, and it's overpowering the wind. But you see that spinning star pattern? That's very indicative of wind-driven fires. On the inside, you see the gases coming out the bottom of the door with the same intensity as they do the top or the middle. That's indicative of a wind-driven fire. And watch what happens when this door opens. Watch the thermal signature. We're going to remotely open the door. You're there. You got your charge line. You got everything on. Boom. You're just not going to maintain that position. You're just not. And again, this is, Sean mentioned it, when we show this stuff to guys, at least on our job, that have had these kinds of experiences, they go, that's it. That's what we tried to tell you. Nobody believed us, but that's what we tried to tell us. It went just like that. Okay? So we need to spend a whole lot more time paying a whole lot more attention to this. Kyle Wilson is still dead. He ain't coming back, right? It's not the TV show. There's not a new episode next week. Kyle was a young firefighter in a young fire department. that were doing yeoman's work at this fire. I taught this class to these guys. I talked to them about this fire. I met all the guys that were engaged in it. They were doing the right thing. They brought themselves a 2.5-inch line up to that second floor to help them to cover that team that was doing the search. All right? They were trying to do everything right. They had a fire started on the back of the building, got its way up into the attic, 40-mile-an-hour winds blowing this thing, right? When that attic flashed over, all hell broke loose. It went from tenable, we got this, to everybody screaming and yelling in a matter of seconds, okay? Everybody dove. Kyle dove in the wrong direction. That's all it came down to. He called a couple of maydays. You can hear him. There's radio traffic. You can hear the poor guy die, all right? Again, nobody made the big mistake. Nobody screwed this up. They just underappreciated the impact of that wind. 2 firefighters died in Houston, Texas, in a ranch, single-family home, flat, 1 story. All right, now it's in Texas, so it's probably 10,000 square feet or something like that, but huge. But again, it's next to an open field, right? It's not a high-rise, it's not a big building, and this was a fire that started in a light fixture, started in an 8B box. They got 2 lines let out through the front door. Their last view of these guys, they were looking at their boots. They stood up for whatever reason. But that tells you something, right? We can all point a finger and say, well, they made a mistake, they stood up, but they could stand up, right? Conditions were such that they were able to get up on their feet. Once the window glass failed in the back, they had like this atrium in the back, that window glass failed, 20 miles an hour worth of wind hit that fire. They were standing next to the line. They didn't get down and follow it out like we all think we're gonna do. They got so hot, so fast, all they did was move. That's all they could think of. I gotta move. And they moved in the wrong direction. They never got out, okay? Took 25 minutes to fight their way back in to find these guys. How'd you like to live through that one? You know where they're at, you know what happened, right? And you just can't because there's that much fire, all right? The wind is gonna laugh at you. Mother Nature is gonna laugh at all of us, all right? If we think we can take her head on. You can't.
Go ahead, Pete.
Okay. Ventilation fires are fused bombs. We said every fire is a ventilation-limited fire. All right, you got to think of these as fused bombs that are going to go off. When you open up that door, you got about 2 minutes to make things happen. 2 minutes is forever when everything's lined up, right? But if you're working with an LDC that day, or least desirable coworker, you know, it happens, right? You got them on your job, I got them on my job. Things can go wrong, and when things go wrong on the fire ground, back in the day, maybe we had 6, 7, 8, 10 minutes where we could recover from some of our missteps, right? When you got 2 minutes to flash over, you don't have that kind of time. You're going to get it right the first time or you're not going to get it right, okay? Also keep in mind that venting doesn't necessarily mean it's vent dead. Just because you got fire coming out that window doesn't mean that you don't have a vent limit condition somewhere in that building. This is still in a lot of the textbooks, all right? This idea that this is the fire growth and development. But that's really not what's happening on the fire ground. That's what happens on the campground. It's a campfire, outside, fuel-controlled fire with all the air it needs. Inside a building with all this additional fuel, this is typically what happens. The fire gets underventilated. It eats up all the available air. Temperatures drop. It goes into the smoldering phase, probably before we get on the scene, sometimes before we even get notified. And it just cooks off and cooks off and cooks off. We come in and open up the door, and you see that very steep line. That's time, right? That's transition to flashover in a very short period of time. Again, when we're equipped, when we're ready, when we really are ready to go and make a difference here, things go good. But if we misstep somewhere, right, and we think water moving through the hose is the same as water in the line and we're ready to go, 2 minutes can go by in a heartbeat. We got to be cautious about that. Not only that, but can happen several times during the course of a firefight. Opening up the front door, opening up the roof, adding ventilation at the rear of the building. Each one of these events can trigger a rapid fire growth event inside the building, and we need to be paying more attention to that than we are. This is one of my favorites, because I had a fire just like this not too long ago. So fully sprinklered building except for where? Attic and the porch where the fire started probably, right? So this can happen. Watch the roof line and listen. Okay? Right here. We're going to see this from the A side as well. Same thing, same event.
Oh God, what do you think happened?
Pay attention here.
I think there was a fire.
Oh really? I mean, what could have caused the fire? Oh shit!
Yeah, no kidding. All right. So what happened here, right? Guys are in there doing what they're supposed to do. They're trying to cut off this fire. You got it up in the attic. It's going to burn across the attic. What do? We get in front of it. Start dropping some ceiling. We're going to put some water on this thing. We're going to cut it off. Otherwise, it's going to take the whole roof off. Problem is, ventilation got ahead of suppression. All right? This thing was venting, right? But downstream, you had all this unburned fuel. You're below it, pulling ceiling. What are you giving it? It's got all kinds of heat. They're not putting the fire out yet, right? So it's got all the heat that it needs. You're giving it the extra. You're leaning it out, and it blew on them. They survived this, okay, because they were wearing everything they were supposed to be wearing, right? But what does this tell us, right? That we have to expand our tactics a little bit, okay? If you're going to open up a void space, this is me coming from where we used to get out of the way, let us drop the ceiling, come in and put it out. If you're going to open up a void space, you get it wet right away. Not when you see fire, not when it pushes down, not when you see smoke, not if it puffs, not if any of that stuff. If you open up a void space, you get it wet. Then you continue to open up and see what you got. Because if you don't, this can easily happen to you. We have all this extra fuel that we didn't used to have running around these buildings. And the spaces that it can accumulate in are bigger and they're more interconnected than ever before. That tells me that we've got to adjust our tactics. Plain and simple. Okay? Yeah.
You think we almost planned it.
You might have.
So we talk about size up. We talk about the importance of doing a 360. But what are you trying to accomplish when you do your size up? You're trying to understand where the fire's at, what's going on inside that building, what are my tactical options here, what are my goals? So as you do your size up, what is the building telling you? And are you interpreting it correctly? So if you pull up, you see smoke, heavy smoke coming out of the windows, around the door frame. You go, I got a working structure fire here. I'm going to, dispatch. I got a one-story ranch, working fire. All hands will be working, right? Wood frame. But if we just wait a few seconds, we're going to see a different picture. And again, is there still a fire inside this building? Are you comfortable with what your size up is going to tell you? Do you know what's inside that building? It's giving you a very different profile. Okay, this is in a lab, so it's being very controlled. This doesn't happen out in the real world. Let's put it in a real building. And this is Bensonville, Illinois, as Pete would say. It's runway 33R at O'Hare now.
Formerly known as Bensonville, now it's 27 left or something like that. They expanded the airport, and they took over part of a town, and we got a lot of buildings to do this. These burns were set up for ATF to come in and do fire investigation. So they're not fire behavior burns. We're trying to make these as real as possible so ATF can come in and do their post-fire investigation. And in the meantime, we get to watch this. The clock is not what's important. What's important is the stage of the fire's growth and development. Ask yourself, when am I pulling up on the scene and what is the fire telling me or not telling me? This is my poster child video for every fire is event limited fire until you can prove otherwise.
Yep, the fire's right here in the front room. You see your exhaust point here. You see air coming around the door. Your size up will be 2.5 story residential, wood front, blah, blah, blah. Working fire, all hands will be working. But I want you to watch the smoke around the door. What's happening? It's puffing, right? So now it's stopped. So why is that happening? You got a vent limited fire. More importantly, as Pete was saying, what's happening to your exhaust point? Your size up may be totally different now. Your size up may be nothing showing, engine 2 is going to investigate. Or truck 2 is going to investigate because the truck was first on the scene, the engine was over on a first responder somewhere. So you're going to kick that door open and then you see the immediate transition. Now someone's screaming, my baby's in there, or someone's in there. What options do you have to control this door as that engine company is responding? What about controlling that door? You can control that fire growth by controlling that door. You're controlling the air to that fire. Is there anything you want to throw in?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing as we get exposed to more guys from around the world. German firefighters, they actually have a tactic called anti-ventilation. They deliberately will go into buildings and try to shut off where the fire is from the rest of the building. And it's not just about stopping the smoke spread. They're using it as a suppression technique. They would ask us, which leg of the fire triangle doesn't apply in the United States? right? If I take the air away, what happens? The fire goes out. The fire goes out, right? So while they're stretching their line up, they get a crew up there ahead of the hose line to block that thing, to stop the smoke spread, and to start suppressing the fire. You can do the same thing here. You're waiting for water, unventilate this thing, okay? There's no advantage to adding more ventilation or letting this go. And remember, if you don't take the door, what happens when the window fails? You can close the door, you can't unbreak a window. So you got this limited opportunity, right? And we need to start taking advantage of it. That takes us back to door control. We have to make door control part of our bread and butter operations. Control the air in as well as letting the gases out. That's part of what we have to do.
It reminds me of a conversation we had at our advisory board. We have a retreat every year, every summer. And this past summer, we sat there, and Stefan Svensson from Sweden is part of our advisory council. And we got into a discussion on search and rescue and aggressive search and rescue. And Charles turned to Stefan, he says, do you guys do search and rescue in Sweden? And Stefan's reply was, we take the problem away. I said, well, do you do search and rescue? He's like, we take the problem away. And finally, after 4 times, he goes, of course we do search and rescue, but we take the problem away. To what Pete was saying, if you put the fire out, everything gets better. So if we want to talk about the impact of opening the door on a fire, especially a starving fire that needs oxygen, and if we think about back to Cherry Road in Washington, D.C., that killed 2 firefighters and severely injured a 3rd by the introduction of air below grade at the source of the fire, and then firefighters operating in that exhaust path, in that flow path. And the sad part about that incident is they had a charged hand line at the back door. But the incident commander didn't want to open up that charged hand line because why? You would have cooked everybody inside. Well, guess what, folks? Those guys got cooked. And if they could have brought that temperature down, they would have been in a safer operational environment. But if you look at it, those firefighters, when they went in that basement, and they were operating in that grade, they started to do a search pattern, and then they recognized conditions were changing very rapidly, and they said when they looked, they could see a tunnel to the outside. Oops. Sorry. And this is what they saw. If you see this, this is at UL, and this is a 2.5-story, opening the front door. When you open the front door, you look at that. You look at it, how it's sucking in that air because that fire is so starving. You see the fire right there in the front room, in the living room. It's starting to build up. And this is where we have to recognize the difference in the airflow. This wind speed here is almost 15 miles per hour. So you have to recognize whether that smoke is lifting or whether now you just created a draft. Because if you created that draft with that or I should say with that wind speed, you should be expecting conditions to change very rapidly and not for the better. So you have to recognize that difference between that smoke lifting and that smoke feeding it. And you can start to see the neutral planes. We have them in basement fires, first floor, second floor. Again, that's where that pressure equalizes, where you have the inlet and the outlet. Should I just?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So we want to talk about the impact of closing a door. And what we're discussing is flow path. And we can give you the long version here. The flow path is the volume, space between an inlet and outlet that allows the movement of heat and smoke from the higher pressure within the fire towards the lower pressure areas, accessible via doors, windows, openings. Basically, what we want to get across is that any operations in this flow path put you at increased risk. Anytime you operate in that flow path, anytime you put yourself between the fire and its exhaust point, puts you at increased risk. You have to understand where it's at, what's going on around you, and what your options are. You need to bring that fire under control as quickly as possible. You see, this is from Cherry Road. You can see the entrance of the air, fire, the heat, right up the stairwell, hits this back wall, and it came down on top of that 3rd firefighter. Again, when you create an opening, you're creating ventilation. Are you creating an inlet or an outlet? You need to understand what you're creating there. Because when you create those distal openings, what are you creating? That flow path. And I know it's pretty easy. When a fire starts in this room, what's that fire creating? Pressure. As it heats up, it's creating more pressure. That pressure wants to go somewhere. High pressure is going to go to low pressure, just like temperature changes. So high pressure is building up. If we put wind at this exhaust point at this window, where is that pressure going to go? It's going to go in the interior hallway. It's going to find an outlet somewhere. And if you're operating in this hallway, you're at increased risk. And some people will say, I've had firefighters in my own department say, whoa, gosh, you're talking high pressures, low pressures, you're talking flow path, you're talking various degrees, pressures. It all gets a little confusing. Let me just dumb it down. Think high pressure to low pressure. If you're in this pathway right here, you're at increased risk. And you have to operate and you have to make decisions accordingly.
Not sure where we're at with the videos, but that's all right. I like working with the guys from FDNY. They're a lot of fun in a lot of ways, especially, the whole getting an interpreter to help us understand each other. I'm just as bad as them, believe me, I know. Well, one of the things, George Healy in particular, he'll say, I'll never get a guy from FDNY to manage the flow path, We're just not doing it. But I can get him to tactically ventilate, okay? I really don't care what you call it. I don't care how it is we send the message. We're going to send the message in a way that it's effective. But really, this is what we're talking about, is that I was always taught, and I really was, when I think back at it, I spent my first 7 years on a truck company in a very vertical city. And we were taught, ventilate as soon as you possibly can, and the more the better. And there was lip service to the wait till the engines got water and all that kind of stuff. But really, more was automatically better, and faster was automatically better. I've completely changed my mind on that. That's not tactical ventilation, all right? If I'm ventilating ahead of the suppression effort, I'm going to make things worse, not better. Tactical ventilation is about making sure that that coordination really does exist, all right? And where I've come down to is that the guy that's making the decision about where to ventilate and how should be the guy inside on that knob. That engine company officer, that guy in the nozzle should be the guy that's calling for the ventilation, not somebody outside. Let's just take a close look at this. So we got a little fire on the B side here, right? We're going to make, right? We're going to make entry into the A side to put this fire out. Let's do it again, all right? Simple, short, nothing crazy about this. But if our timing is off, right, if we don't get enough water fast enough, and by going in that front door, we've established or we've opened up another flow path, that can easily happen to us. Yes? So how do we prevent that from happening? I'll give you the short version. One, hit it from the outside through the window, okay? And if you do it right, you're not pushing it in, you're not steaming, and we'll come to that a little bit later. But you don't understand, Chief. You understand, where I work, we got 16-foot high barbed wire fences with firefighter-eating dogs on the other side. I can't get to the B-side window. And that is true in places, right? The B-side window might not be available to you. Now what? Herbie Johnson would say, it sucks to be you. Get in there and put the fire out. How do we manage this, right? We manage the flow path. Instead of open the door, head down, and go in, maybe we do a little something I was taught with high-rise fires. Open the door, start flowing water as soon as I got a little crack in that door, right? Use the reach of my stream, cool that environment, and once I go in, this is where we're going to piss everybody off, control the door behind me, right? If you need an open door to find your way out of a building when you're attached to a hose line, get yourself a pistol and a black and white. You're in the wrong public service job. Okay? I mean, really. I get it, but let's not hang all of our, hang everything. Oh, I need that door open. No, I need somebody managing that door. I need to manage that airflow. I need to know where everybody's at. Okay? There's a lot of ways to look at this. Here's another example. This is from several years ago, but it speaks to the same point. So we got a fire in the back of the building. It's venting. That doesn't mean this environment is vented. Well, we're going to add more air to it as we drag an 1 3/4 line. Not only that, more ventilation is better, so we're going to vent those windows too. Okay, yeah, I see a lot of head shaking. That's good. That means you're already there. Not a good idea, right? Yeah, no kidding. Ventilation getting ahead of suppression, right? Just because I got a charged line, just because I got guys moving to the seat of the fire does not mean it's okay to add more ventilation, particularly if I'm adding that ventilation behind their entry point. I just created this huge, very efficient flow path. I'm dragging all of that heat and all that energy over their position, giving it more air to lean out on before they can effectively get to the seat of the fire and start to cool things off. Okay? More is not automatically better. Forcing the front door is ventilation and always should be thought of ventilation. Ventilation always leads to fire growth. It's just physics. It's not an opinion. Nice thing about science is it's true whether you believe it or not. When you ventilate the building, the fire is going to grow. That's okay if you're in a position to suppress it or isolate that part of the building. But we need to understand that much more emphatically. I was taught that from the day I came on the job over 35 years ago, but I didn't appreciate it the way I appreciate it today. That front door is very efficient ventilation. It's not just about the size of the door. I could have a window opening that's twice the size of that door. That door is going to be more efficient ventilation. And the reason why is the window's up here, and the gases are down to the sill of that window. And when it tries to vent, it's going to have a very hard time bringing in the fresh air it needs for that ventilation to take place. It will happen, but it'll be very inefficient. A door, on the other hand, goes all the way to the ground, very easy path for that cool replacement air to come in, and it's going to move things along that much faster. Don't underestimate the power of an open door. We often do, and that often gets us in trouble. Here's an example, okay? Again, this is not about doing it wrong, right? This is about how well do we understand. You got a room full of fire down in there. Can you get in there and hook that door and close it? Right? And if you can't, or the door is gone, can I close the apartment door? Right? A German firefighter would say, why not, right? Use all sides of the fire triangle. They elect not to because they think they're about to have water. They're about to have water. They're about to have water. Right? In a very short period of time, once you start to lose the glass, now closing the door doesn't do you as much good. But what did I say about the efficiency? Would closing the door still help you out here? Absolutely. Don't give up. So this starts to expose the tree starts to expose the second floor porch, that starts to expose the eaves into the attic. So in less than a minute, we go from a hand can fire, right, to something that's requiring extra alarms and is going to transition into the whole structure. All, in my opinion, over a closed door. Let me further ask you this, and this is just my own thing to beat up on. You guys got silver bullets or hand cans on your rigs? Are they welded to the apparatus? You might think they were. Fires like this, I routinely was instructed to bring the hand can to. Yeah, you know you got to work in fire. Yeah, you know they're leading out. Could I have changed this with a hand can? Okay. My tool assignment was Halligan bar, hand can, pickhead axe, pike pole. God forbid that I ever showed up anywhere without all of them. Right? And when we thought that when the engine was leading out, we would take theirs too. So we had 15 gallons of water, not 10. All right? Water, water, water. The earlier, the better. And control the air. Use all parts of the fire triangle. If that was a couch in that room, right, could I hook the couch and drag it out the apartment? How many of us have ever thought to do that? I was taught that early on. Do that. Get the fuel out of, get it out into the front lawn. Now it's not a problem. Now it's a rubbish fire. A lot less paperwork, too, right? One more, and I'll turn it back over to Sharon. So controlling. What's that?
Go right ahead.
Go right ahead.
You're on a roll.
Controlling the door. You limit the air, you limit the size of the fire, okay? You can move more aggressively through the building if you control the fire size. All right, this is counterintuitive to us, and I know that, there's a lot of room for discussion. I'm happy to have it at the time when we have the time. But I'm telling you this in no uncertain terms. I've come to the point where I believe I make entry to do a search, I want that door closed behind me. All right? Because that's allowing me to control the fire's growth and development. I want to learn to routinely isolate myself from the area where I think the fire is. Whatever my assignment is, I'm looking for how do I isolate myself while I'm trying to accomplish my objectives. All right? We're not telling you to close it, nail it shut, seal it with caulk. Control the door. Control the airflow to the extent you can helps you control the fire. That's what we came to do. Okay? It's as simple as this. Somebody has to advance that hose through the pinch point. And I'll tell you, if you're going to try to do this on your job, there's some keys to success. One's very practical. Don't put the guy on the outside because he's outside and you're inside, and he's not going to like that. I'm not going to like that either. So he's not going to want to do it. Not only that, this is very inefficient, right? Using the little muscles trying to push. Get him on the inside. From a practical reason, one, he wants to be where you are. He's inside. From a much more practical aspect, he's better positioned to understand your environment, communicate with you if he needs to, if the radio isn't your best option, and visually see what's going on, and he can use the big muscles to help move the hose line through. When the engine company communicates, yeah, we got it, we're getting a knock on the fire, he can verify that by looking over his head, open up the door, ventilation takes place apace, right? As fast as possible now, because you're suppressing fire. That's all we're asking you to do, to think about this as a viable option. It works really good.
And this is where the research is helping staffing arguments. Some folks will say, well, some of this research could be used against us in staffing.
Shame on us.
Exactly.
It says exactly the opposite. Everything about this research says we need more firehouses with more firefighters in it, without a doubt. There's too much to do. It has to be done immediately. The people don't have time for these things to happen sequentially. They have to happen simultaneously. That requires equipment, resources, and manpower. Door control, the other thing that we can measure, how much time is good time? How much time do you need? How much time can I buy by keeping that door open just enough to advance the line? In this case, when the fire's right inside, I can postpone flashover by 2 minutes. Can you use 2 minutes on the fire ground? Can your victims use 2 minutes on the fire ground? Right? If I don't control this door in this scenario, until and unless I get effective water, 2 minutes later, we're going to flashover, nobody's surviving nothing. So that's what I'm trying to use all parts of the fire triangle to try to control the object. In the simple one story, we delayed it by 2 minutes. In a bigger 2-story building, at 15 minutes, we stopped the test. We figured, well, we delayed flashover by at least 15 minutes. That's long enough, okay? So we stopped it. So a lot depends on where the fire is located, how big the building is, but we know 2 minutes on the small end and almost indefinitely on the large end. Venting doesn't always lead to cooling. Well-timed and coordinated ventilation leads to improved conditions. We've been talking about that all day long today, all right? And for whatever reason, this whole idea where the nozzle is when you first open it up seems to be the one that gets the most controversy. To me, that's simple. I've been doing that in Chicago for 30-some years. We called it quick water. Pull up, hit it with the deck gun, move the apparatus, lead out with the cross lay, finish the job off. We had that option my entire career virtually, all right? What is changing for me is this whole idea of limiting ventilation and making sure that our ventilation is not getting ahead of our suppression effort. It has to be more coordinated than ever before because why? Because of the fuel. You have a much more volatile fuel package. Case in point, and I will turn it over to you after this.
No, go to 6. Go to 6.
Go to 6?
We got 30 minutes to get 8 in.
All right, here, we'll do it. So this is which county? Prince George, Prince William? I get my princes mixed up.
This is College Park.
College Park, all right.
Steve's home.
So we get on the scene, right? And they know what they got. They got this little house. They got this kind of odd porch on the front, and they got a sliding glass door right next to the main entry door. Right inside that door, they got a couch. It's couch fire. They got people telling them, yeah, the folks that live there are usually home this time of day. Guys look behind them. They're leaning out with a hose line. Do you go do a search ahead of the hose line? Kind of department specific. I think you could justify it. I'll even up the ante a little bit. Dad's outside in the front lawn, all snottied up, pointing into the back, saying, they're in there, they're in there. Do you go? Yeah, absolutely you go. So they go, right? They go, they leave the door open behind them. What do you suppose is happening? Fire starts to grow. Somebody sees it, the fire's starting to grow. He was trained to do what? Well, the guys are back there, the fire's here, and I have an available ventilation open. What do? I open that up to let all that heat out. He does exactly that. What he also does is let all that air in. Hot gases can't come out unless cool gases are coming back in. It's physics. It has to happen. We go from entry to flashover of the entire structure in less than 2 minutes. These guys come out on fire. They got out because when they went, they guessed right and made it out the door. On fire. The chief's on the radio. Would somebody pick up that hose line and put those 2 guys out? They had to pick up the burnt-through hose line and put these guys out. Again, they survived. They were wearing all their gear. They were properly equipped, pretty well trained, managed to get out. How do we stop this from happening? We got to go in. They're inside. We can't stand out and wait. All right? How do we stop this from happening? What do we do differently? Okay? Get inside, close the door. I got a hand can. You're going to go. Now, we got to be together, right? In a building this size, does that mean we're surgically attached to one another the whole time? You go back there and find them, I'm going to do this, right? Or I'm going to do this. And if I'm losing, I yell, I'm losing, right? I'm bailing out. He goes out the back, I go out the front, we gave it the good college try, right? But that's not going to happen because I controlled the air and I'm getting what's burning wet. I'm not completing extinguishment, I'm slowing it down, I'm getting wet, all right? He's going to complete his search, I'm going to get this thing knocked down a little bit. Life is going to be good. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. A routine couch fire. 2 minutes. Nothing extraordinary here. This is as ordinary as it gets, right? Manage the air, get early water. Doesn't have to be a lot of water, doesn't have to be a lot of air. Manage the air, get early water. That's the lesson. If FD&Y can do it, any of us can do it. This is the old V. Historically, the old V had virtually limitless authority to do what he needed to do. But that was pre-radio, right? You had to give him that authority because he couldn't communicate with that company inside or the guy on the opposite side of the building. He can communicate now, and that's what he's doing. He's waiting for that engine officer to give him permission to take that glass. Not when he thinks it needs to be taken. He sees fire on the other side of that window. And traditionally, he'd say, got a working fire, got fire back there, I'm going to vent it. They're course correcting that. They're saying, no, you wait until that engine company officer gives you permission to add ventilation, then you add ventilation. And if you could hear the radio traffic, that's exactly what you'd hear is taking place. It's not a remarkable change, right? It's just steering it in a little bit different direction. Let's have a little better communication on the fire line. Here's kind of what happens when you don't have that. This is the classic fire went out, nobody got hurt. Really? We want our bar that low? I think not. So instead of closing the door, what do? They add more air to the fire. This happens, right? Can I unbreak that window? Not so much. Still, if I close the door now, I'll still have some effect. Okay? That's really productive too. By all means, get inside there, Lieutenant, get that helmet good and salty and dirty and stand up in it because those sissy chiefs today are going to make you wash it. But if you get it really burnt on and crusty, it won't come off. So make sure you stand up in that crap. This is just, this is craziness, right? Preheating his gear, putting all those carcinogens on it, for what? To what purpose? When there's a purpose, have at it. But when there's no purpose, what are we doing to ourselves? Okay? They get their water, and here's the interesting thing. They are about to have 3 floors of fire, right? They really are about to have 3 floors of fire. But 20 gallons worth of water, just a few seconds of water, it's what's driving all of this. The vinyl siding does indeed self-extinguish. The hot gases coming out the second floor window are just that, just hot gases. They haven't engaged any fuel yet. And all of this goes away once we get some effective water on the seat of the fire, all right? What did I say about water first, right? Fire control is your tactical priority. How effective are your searches going on that second floor until this happens? Not so much, right? They're going, but they're going very slow and they're very difficult. Once you get effective water on the fire, those guys can get up off their belly and onto their knees. In a couple more minutes or a couple more seconds, they can probably get off their knees and on their feet. Now they're being aggressive. Now they're clearing that building. Now they're searching. Fire control is critically important. Coordination of vertical ventilation has to occur with fire attack. Vertical ventilation is not a magic bullet. I thought it was. We got done with the horizontal ventilation study, and I said, Kerber, I get it. You're a genius. It's great. I understand that. But I've been there. I've done that. My job was to get on that roof, cut that hole, and if I got a big enough hole over the seat of that fire, it might grow, but I'm isolating it. I'm keeping it right here while the engine company gets their lead out, and I'm lifting everything, and I thought all this wonderful stuff is happening. And you know what? It can still happen. But I'm depending on knowing how much fuel is in there. Because what we're going to see here in this really simple video is it doesn't take much fire to overwhelm even a 4x8 hole. We're going to put a 4x8 hole directly over the seat of this fire. All right? And what you're going to watch happen is once I get that opened up, you'll see the smoke coming out the door, reverse itself, and go out the hole in the roof. That's what's supposed to happen. It happens for about 2 or 3 seconds. The fire grows so much because I've added more air that it overwhelms that opening. It starts coming out the top of the door again. Okay? So it's not about yes or no. It's about understanding limitations and timing and all that kind of stuff. On top of all that, 10 gallons worth of water, 30 gallons worth of water, now the magic of vertical ventilation really does take place because the hole can handle the energy now. But not unless and until we get that ventilation. So here we go. We got our bidirectional flow path. It's pumping out the top of the door, and it's pumping through all the rest of the building. He's going to fall down here. They had a little problem with the tripwire. Now, it's not open just yet. Okay, so we're not seeing any change. It's kind of hard to see on the film, but I'll give you a heads up when we actually got a hole in the roof. Now, remember, this one's 4x4. This is 4x8. So now it's open, and you see that change in the top. It's sucking everything out. It's going out the roof. But now it's not anymore, is it? The fire is growing faster than that hole can exhaust. And it looks really good. When I'm looking at the hole, it looks great. I got smoke coming out. I got flames coming out. I'm isolating my fire. But I'm not isolating my fire because I got more fire than that hole can handle. All right? That coordination between suppression and ventilation is much more critical than ever before. That's the lesson. right? Sometimes I think it's as simple as if we just took a stick away from one guy and put him on the hose line, that we might get the balance back again, you know? And I know it's not that simple, but could we just slow this down a little bit and speed this up? How could I really easily do that? Take you and put him with them. And maybe that's how we get it back. This is a similar experiment from Governor's Island in New York. The reason we put this in there, I encourage you, if you want to do some follow-up, the Governor's Island experiments with NIST, and you can get them off the UL site, NIST, Modern Fire Behavior, a lot of places, just Google it, is probably the most accessible package, video package of this information that's out there to date. All right, so if you want to do some follow-up, I'd say start with Governor's Island. And you see what they did, same kind of thing as we had in Chicago. They had a bunch of acquired structures, and they ran out and just did a whole bunch of scenarios with FDNY and NIST. Open this, close that, put the line here, put the line there, what happens? And we took a good look at all kinds of different scenarios.
Okay, I'll go to 3 and then.
Okay.
We got 20 minutes. So what we're going to do is we're going to take it right up to the 4 o'clock, and then we'll stick around for questions and answers after that. But we have a time limit of 4 o'clock here for the online portion. So we're going to talk a little bit about aggressive knockdown. Ultimately requires getting water on what is burning. And we're talking about attic fires. And again, this is where the research comes into play. We sat around as an advisory group, and we have influences from all over the country and all over the world. We started talking about what's the best way to approach an attic fire. Somewhere you come from the eave, you come from the peak, you come from below, you go in, open up the ceiling and hit it from below. There was the Phoenix way of going through the window. And so we had all these different opinions on the best way to approach an attic fire, but that's the best part of the research. We get to take all those different versions and all those different opinions and start to apply them. And this is what we found. This isn't Building 11. This is a structure fire. This is a contents fire inside this attic. And what we found is you need to get water on the burning surfaces. Once you can get water on the burning surfaces, everything gets better. You're going to see Steve come into play here, and he's going to simply hit it from the eave. And what he's doing is he's going right down this line, and he's applying water to the bottom surface. Do I have the wrong video?
No, he'll get there.
Okay. Forgot thought I had the wrong video for a sec. So we got a nice working fire. And the other thing we found in this is that we became ventilation challenged and ventilation limited in many, many, many of these attic fires. And so they did become a challenge to sustain burning, but we know that it's happening out there because we've all responded to them. Typically what you do is you make the interior, if there's a stairwell, you go up the steps, get in there, and start knocking down that attic. What we found is once you start applying the water's going up this side, it's hitting the peak, and then it's also covering the distal side of that attic. So what are you doing? You're quenching the burning surfaces. You're putting water on them. And also you're wetting the surfaces that aren't burning yet, so you're impeding their burning capabilities. And you can just see that fire effectively gets knocked down. Now there may be some topography challenges, there may be some construction challenges on applying this water through the eave. But you have some options such as taking an exterior wall or wall right on the outside and then start to apply the water up on that way also. You want to get to those burning surfaces to start to bring it under control. This was much more effective than coming through the peak or coming through from below.
The real lesson with this one for me is a better appreciation of knowing what's really burning, when we're approaching these things. Steve thought that the most effective attack was going to be through the gable end window. I can see everything, I can move my line around. But what happens is, in this case, it's trusses, but even stick-built, that breaks up that stream so effectively you can't get any effective reach, much more so than we thought. And then the other part is that we saw from being able to measure stuff, the fuel load, what's really burning here, once this thing goes post-flashover, no matter how much junk you throw in the attic, what's really burning is the underside of the roof deck. If I don't get that wet, I'm not getting ahead of this thing. Even when the fire starts here, it always winds up on the underside of the roof deck. And think about why. Air in low in the eaves, air out high at the ridge vent. The airflow is going to draw the fire to that fuel, and that fuel is what's going to contribute most to the problem. So if I address that problem in this case, that's the fastest way to get ahead of these things. And that's the bigger lesson. Try to figure out what's burning and how do I get the most water with the least amount of air to what's actually burning. That'll help you make better tactical decisions as well.
And also what we found is that ridge vent is made of plastic. And that will melt when it's exposed to elevated temperatures. And that will seal your attic space. Again, could impede your size up. Understand what it's showing you. Just a quick conversation about basement fires. I was always taught when I came on this job, make the basement, kid. Everything gets better once you make the basement, right? As Pete talked about, go down that chimney. Once you get to the floor, everything gets better. And we know basement fires are very, very hazardous. We've lost multiple firefighters in multiple incidents due to fires below grade, whether it's Cherry Road or whether it's the Diamond Heights fire in San Francisco. Both of these fires were below grade firefighters. Firefighters were operating on the floor above it or trying to make that basement. And if we start to look at today's basement fire, this is out in Delaware County. This is a protected stairwell here. And this is a simulated basement. This is simulating a furnished basement. You want to know how you get the fuel package of a furnished basement? You go out and buy cases of styrofoam food takeout containers, and you burn them. That relates to the heat release rate of your furniture, burning styrofoam. But as you can see up this stairwell here, if you're coming down this stairwell here, you got a protected stairwell, you make the basement is 200 degrees in our operational environment. Yeah, we can operate in 200 degrees. Let's talk about 20 seconds later. We're going to see a change in temperature here. And as that temperature increases, just in about 25 seconds, we're going to see it double to 400 degrees. Is 400 degrees within our operational environment? At the upper reaches, right? We don't want to spend a lot of time in there, but how many have dealt with the loss of pressure? How many have dealt with the burst hose line? How many have dealt with an obstacle in the way? 20 seconds later, it's 750 degrees. Is that within our operational environment? Absolutely not. Are we getting back up those steps? Absolutely not. So we have to look at what our options are. I'm going to kind of just for the sake of time. So we want to look at what our options are. We want to get water on the fire. We want to fight the fire from the level that it's at. If we think of New Coleraine or Coleraine Township in Ohio, where they lost 2 firefighters. Again, a 360 indicates that there's a walkout basement. Could we have applied water from the level of the fire and done it more safely? And that's what we're looking at our options. Also, when we dealt with multiple dwelling fires, sometimes I had an officer say, hey, sit at the steps, protect the steps. Protect us so we can do the search. Keep the fire at bay. But if applying a hand line here at the top of the steps, what's happening to the fire in below grade? Not much. I'm not making much of an impact, am I? But what's that fire doing to your operational platform? To that floor you're operating on? It's eating away at that floor. So I'm not really improving conditions, and we can see it. We cooled the top of the steps a couple hundred degrees, but in the basement we went from 1,250 to 1,450, from 1,200 to 1,500. Things were still continuing to deteriorate. But do I have options? Well, instead of putting a hand line at the top of the steps, what if I directed a hand line somewhere else as I'm walking forward? And can we start to apply water directly to the fire? But wait a minute, that's a defensive operation because I'm hitting water from the outside.
Did you see the fireball come up the stairs? Did you see the steam cloud? Me neither, because it didn't happen. It's not there.
And that's what we have to consider. What is offensive and what is defensive? Which way were those firefighters moving? They were moving forward. It's an offensive operation. They hit it with an exterior attack, transition through the front door, and then complete extinguishment in the basement. Did they improve their work environment? Absolutely. Did that fire stop deteriorating that floor, their operational platform? Absolutely. They made things better throughout the house, from 1,200 degrees to 400 degrees, from 1,700 degrees, 300 degrees, from 600 degrees at the top of the steps, 600 in our operational environment? No. Is 200? Yes. We made things better.
And that gets us to, water doesn't push fire, air does. Actually, fire does, right? Fire creates pressure, and it's the pressure moving through the building that moves the fire.
We have 12 minutes.
But really, I mean, did these guys that came before us, were they making this stuff up? Right? They just said this to make our job harder? No, they were experiencing things on the fire ground that you've experienced, I've experienced, and we have to understand where did that come from. We can't just say, no, that's not true, they were wrong. They weren't wrong. They were reporting things that they experienced on the fire ground. We need to address that. But if we just continue to say that it's the water that pushes the fire, because that's the easy way to say it, we're taking away a valuable tactic that you just saw from out of our hands, and we don't want to do that, right? We want to be more effective. We want to be more aggressive. For some reason, the second part of the problem has become, what do we call this? You know, personally, I like the passive-aggressive attack. That's my favorite. But I don't know that it needs a name. To Sean's point, right? You're either offensive or defensive. We're moving in to occupy this building and put out the fire and clear it, or we can't operate in here, so we're defensive, right? And where you are when you initiate that attack, or where you are standing when you open up that nozzle, doesn't define, you know, and I don't know that it needs a name, all right? But if having a name helps you write your SOG or whatever, pick anyone from the list. It's all the same to me. A lot of this, we'll hop over these videos real quick, but this takes us back to the Governor's Island stuff and what it helps us understand, because we did many and many and many of these things. Dan and Steve to date have done about 400 to 500 burns, not a couple dozen, hundreds of burns where they've measured and all this kind of stuff, all right? And part of what we learn is here, look, when I throw some water through the window, if I was pushing fire, well, this got a whole lot better. Well, what about the adjacent room full of fire? Whoops, that one got a whole lot better. Well, what about that one got a whole lot better too. And then even over here in the hallway where the victim might be, that got better. So as I'm forcing this front door, it's really simple. You're forcing the front door. Do these people have time to wait for you to force the front door at these temperatures? They don't. How do I improve their environment? I get it wet. I cool things off. The door is open. I shut down. I reposition. I go in. I get my victim. I put my fire out. Life is good. Don't delay water for some artificial reason, all right? The next piece of this is, and I think you got to click on this one. The next piece of this is, so where did this pushing fire come from? We know I've been on the wrong side of a fire stream. How did this happen? This video pretty much shows how it happens. Cool. For whatever reason, they can't get to the seat of the fire. You've been there. I've been there. This can happen. They do the right thing. They pull their guys out. They reposition. They start to look for an alternative attack. Turns out the fire's on the D side. They take the window. This guy's got a nice tight stream. I wish he was a little lower and a little severer angle, but he's doing the right thing. As long as the hot gases and the steam and the smoke keep coming out the window, you're not pushing anything anywhere. But watch what happens when he changes his nozzle pattern and his angle of attack. Wide angle fog. Look at the smoke up top. Complete reversal. Right? What pushed the fire? Okay? You know, did you ever fog out a room during overhaul? Does it surprise you that it works just as good from the outside in as it does from the inside out? Shouldn't it, right? Okay? Maximize the water, minimize the air entrainment. It's really simple. We can go out to the experiment ground, the training ground, and we can look at this a little bit more deliberately. So we got an acquired structure here. We got 2 rooms on the 2nd floor that meet at a landing right in the middle, and we got some stairs going up there. So you see that there's fire in both rooms, and we line that landing with OSB, so we got a good transition into the landing area as well. Firefighter's going to approach on the right. He's given a straight stream, and he's just told, put water on the fire. That's all he's told. Put some water on the fire. Here he comes. All right? Now, as he throws water in the window, watch for the fireball. Watch for the interruption of the thermal layer. Watch for the steam cloud. Keep watching. It ain't going to happen, but keep watching. All right? All he did was put some fire out. Okay? Again, I wish he was a little closer, a little steeper angle would have been even better. This firefighter's given a fog nozzle. He's told to do the same thing. Put water on the fire. Okay? Watch the top of the stairs. Ouch. Okay? That's going to hurt. Again, did water push fire? No. He did 2 things. One, he blocked the opening. He physically blocked the opening, right? So if I got gases exiting this opening and I take that opening away, where are they going to go? They're going to go somewhere else. They're going to take the next available path. Second is he entrained a lot of air and really wasn't getting all that much water in there. So you saw what you saw. All right? On the other hand, when we have a nice tight stream, minimize the air entrainment, maximize the reach and penetration of the stream, only good things happen. Get a little bit of a knockdown, reposition, get inside, clean it up. Life is good. This gets us to what? Door closest to the truck should not dictate line and stream placement. We talked about a lot of components of this. Why do we go through the front door 90% of the time? We're better. It's closest to us probably, right? But it's really not, and it's probably where we should go, but we lost the why. All right? We've lost the why. Think about this. when you enter and leave your house on a routine basis, do you use the front door? Depends where you live, but for most people it's no. But yet, think about how your house is built. Even if it's a new house, odds are it was built as if you did. The reason to go through the front door more often than not is because that's your easiest access to where? Everywhere in the house, right? The front door leads to all places. So yeah, that would be our default position. But if the wind is 20 miles an hour off the seaside and I'm on a slope or next to an open field, I might think twice about that, right? If I know that I've got a known victim in a different location and I want to get to them faster, I might think twice about that. If I got a high security front door and I can get to a B-side or a D-side window and get some knockdown while we're getting through that door, I want to think about that as well, right? It shouldn't dictate our line placement. Okay? Think about it. So the fire's right here where I can see it right at the front door. Who's going to go around to the uninvolved side, scale the fence, kill the dog, force your way in the back, and fight this fire from the uninvolved side to the involved side? Who's going to do that? Anybody? There are actually some firefighters that would say, yes, that's exactly what we're going to do. But most of us intuitively know that the fastest way to get a handle on this thing is go right to the front door, knock the thing down, push our way in, and get the job done. All right? So why would it be different if I had this problem here? Why would this all of a sudden be the wrong thing to do? Right? Now, more times than not, right through the front door is going to be the way to handle this. I'm not challenging that at all. But there are numerous situations, you've been there, I've been there, where this gets delayed or this is not your best option. And if we take that away, if we take that knockdown from the exterior, away from our firefighters, away from ourselves, because we think some bad voodoo is going to happen, we're taking away a viable tactic that's not only important for our safety, but these people in these open bedroom doors need us to address this as fast as possible. Not in the way that makes us feel better, not in the way that meets with our traditions or our sense of ourselves, but in a way that reduces, that improves their environment in the shortest period of time. That's our obligation. That's what we came to do, and we need to take advantage of every opportunity we have to do that. Another similar situation, right? If it's coming out the living room window, again, you wouldn't go all the way around the back just to be on the uninvolved side of this thing. You go right inside the front door. Well, when all of this is full of fire, and you hit it with your line, aren't you pushing fire into the bedrooms? Right? We kind of routinely say, well, we go inside to put ourselves between the fire and the victims. Well, sometimes that's not possible, but yet we do it anyway, okay? So let's be careful about our assumptions and what we think they lead to. Fastest water is the best water. Not only that, but the interior might not be what we think it is, right? So I could get in here, and if you guys have done this, the first turn ain't so bad. The second one is a son of a gun, is it not? And if you've been there, you're all nodding your heads, right? So if I can back this down, if I can cool this off a little bit before I make that interior push, I'm making things better for everybody, my crew included. Why would I not do that? Am I zipping all the way through? You take this.
No, it's
Cool.
up to you. Okay.
Thank you.
Good news, we got a couple extra minutes granted from Aaron over here. So we're going to wrap up here. We got through all 20, or we're just about to get through all 20, so we won the bet.
Cool.
But, you know, we're talking about controlling the flow path. Can we have multiple flow paths in the building? Absolutely. Anytime we create an opening, we create a potential flow path. If I have a fire in this bedroom and I open this front door, what am I doing with that fire? I'm drawing it towards that front door, correct? If I have a victim in this bedroom, what are some considerations? Now, we've talked in the past, hey, take out a window, make that bedroom more tenable, make the atmosphere more tenable for that occupant. We've been taught that in the past. But if I take this, I'm getting ahead of myself, but if I take this window out, what am I creating? An exhaust point, right? A flow path. Can I have multiple flow paths here towards the front door and also out that window? Depends on how much pressure I have in that room. The greater the pressure, it's going to seek lower pressure. It wants to find lower pressure. But now if I take this back window, what am I creating? I'm creating an additional flow path. So what am I doing for this occupant? Am I making conditions more tenable for that occupant? Or am I actually drawing fire to that occupant? Remember, an occupant can survive for a short period of time in an oxygen-deficient atmosphere. An occupant can survive no time in an atmosphere that's 1,200 to 1,800 degrees. So again, what are we trying to accomplish? If I apply exterior water, I start to bring that to a close. I'm going to skip this video, and I want to play a video for you, and some people have taken exception to it. They think we're calling the firefighters a bunch of monkeys, and that's not the intent of this video. I want you to look at it and just watch it for a minute.
group of scientists placed 5 monkeys in a cage and in the middle a ladder with bananas on top. Every time a monkey went up the ladder, the scientists soaked the rest of the monkeys with cold water. After a while, every time a monkey went up the ladder, the others beat up the one on the ladder. After some time, no monkey dared go up the ladder, regardless of the temptation. Scientists then decided to substitute one of the monkeys. The first thing this new monkey did was go up the ladder. Immediately, the other monkeys beat him up. After several beatings, the new member learned not to climb the ladder, even though he never knew why. A second monkey was substituted, and the same occurred. The first monkey participated on the beating for the second monkey. The replacements repeated until what was left was a group of 5 monkeys that, even though never received a cold shower, continued to beat up any monkey who attempted to climb the ladder. If you asked the new group of monkeys why the beatings took place, the answer would probably be,
"Well, I don't know. That's just how things are done around here."
So first of all, no monkeys were harmed in the taping of this video. But the point is not to call the fire service a bunch of monkeys. The point is that if I walk up to you and I say, hey, in Villa Park, why do you do this? I don't know, that's just what our SOPs say we do, right? Why did you go through the A side? Why did you go through the D side? I want you to come back and say, well, that's what the SOP says. I want you to come back and give me a reason why you made that decision. And that's the goal out of all of this research, is to give you the information so you can look at a fire scene, so you can look at a situation and determine what's the most appropriate tactic that's at your selection. And that you can deploy those tactics, you can deploy your resources on that fire scene to make sure everybody goes home. Because if we don't understand our fire environment, if we don't continue to learn, if we don't take this knowledge and this research and incorporate it into our local tactics, we're doomed to continue the same practices.
A firefighter had to be helped from the burning home. Eyewitness News reporter Deborah Wrigley is finding out details about the fire and the family who lives there. She's live with more. Deborah?
The fire trucks are finally gone, and now the family who lived here until this morning is taking what they can find amid all the debris. This is the aftermath, but look at the scene just before noon. This is what firefighters responded to. A small house on fire, no one inside at the time, where the fire had been smoldering for a while. When it erupted, flames shot through the roof. A firefighter from the Houston Fire Department with a protective suit and air pack was the first to go through the door, but then there was trouble.
And the door closed behind him, left him in there. So the other guys immediately opened the door, pulled him out because he was taking some heat, and then they went in and finished extinguishing the fire.
Listen, I don't fault the chief for protecting his folks, and I don't fault the folks in this situation. This is not about criticizing. This is about looking at situations where firefighters were harmed or killed or potentially harmed and learning from them. I hear people say, if a firefighter is severely injured or he's killed, don't you disrespect the memory of that guy, of that hero. What's more disrespectful is if we don't discuss the situation and what led to those decisions. Every NIOSH report we've read is a series of issues or a series of events that led to that fatality. It's more disrespectful to allow you or you or you to die in the exact same way because we were afraid to discuss it and we were afraid to learn from it. We had a fire that was self-vented. We bypassed that fire to make an interior attack and almost killed a firefighter doing so. We have to learn from the research. We have to learn from these events that have killed our brothers and sisters. If we don't, we're going to continue to do the same things over and over and over again. If something should happen to me, please talk about it, learn from it. Don't die the same way I did. That would be disrespecting my memory. And that's why we take this research. That's why we take everything we do and we bring it out to you. That's the goal of it. We're not selling anything. We're not selling a product. We're giving research. I should say Steve and his team is giving us the knowledge. And it's up to us, it's our responsibility to incorporate it how we operate locally so we can make sure our members go home. And all this information is free. We've got online training programs that have been put together with the advisory board, and Julie Zipperer has put these together. They're in modules. You can go through them at the firehouse. We did it in Cleveland. We have required training every quarter, online training. Every member of our department has gone through these. You can do a module at the firehouse one day. You can do a second one the next day. You can do a module, get up, go on a run, come back, pick right up where you left off. But it's taking that information, and then you understand how to incorporate in your local politics or your local tactics, what your resources are, what your capabilities are. That's your responsibility. There's the UL Firefighter Safety webpage. All of the reports are here. All of these reports are here. You don't have to read 700 pages. In fact, Steve will recommend don't read all 700 pages. Read the executive summary, then go through one of the online training programs or go to a class that one of the advisory board members are presenting. Ask questions. Understand the research. And also on modernfirebehavior.com, they talk about recent incidents. And at the end of the day, all of this is free. You can contact either Pete or I. You can contact Steve directly with questions, comments, thoughts. And I also want to encourage you, whenever there's a notice for a technical panel, because what we do is with the research, there's the advisory board that kind of advises Steve. But then as Steve decides what research project, if he gets funding for that research project, he puts out a call for technical panel members. And we go through, we have 350 people apply for the last technical panel. And we go through, we look at the resumes. Pick someone who's only got 2 years on a job. Pick someone who's got 37 years on a job. Pick someone from a rural fire department. Pick someone from a metropolitan fire department. So you have multiple points of input. You need that multiple points of input. Differences of opinion are good because it calls to question. It makes us question. When we question, we come up with ideas. We come up with research projects. And then hopefully we come up with answers. So that's our goal. Again, at the end of the day, it's all about not putting any more names in our memorial. That's what it's all about. We have a few minutes, right? We have 5 minutes. If you have a question, please use the microphone. We might get cut off, so at this point I want to say on behalf of General President Shapeberger and Secretary Treasurer Tom Miller, we really appreciate you being here and sticking through us with this whole class, and we appreciate those who are watching online at the firehouse or in the Union Hall. If you have a question, please use the microphone so they can hear you at home. If you want to come up to us afterwards, you can do that also. No? Okay. Okay.